All right, Sub One here. Wanted to touch base a little bit on the really interesting developments coming out of the Activision versus Engine owning lawsuit. This lawsuit was filed, what, like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And we've seen them kind of go back and forth in the courts. But most recently, as of I think about 2 days ago, a judge has ruled unanimously uh, in favor of Activision in this case. So they've entered a default judgment on all counts, including copyright infringement and um, RICO statutes and a number of other issues. And it's really interesting to read through the entire document to see just how much trouble it looks like the folks over at Engine Owning are in, and it's possible they don't even realize how much trouble they're in because they fired their attorneys or forced them to quit. It's not, I'm not clear which from reading the document, but we're going to take a look at that real quick here. But first of all, it was super interesting to see Engine Owning actually reply. They put this statement up. The first paragraph is all about how much their cheats suck and they got caught. But then they start here with there has been a lot of false claims regarding the lawsuit against Engine Owning. All the guys targeted in the lawsuit are inactive and have been for a long time. It doesn't matter. The project was handed over to new owners years ago. Also, not going to matter here. Some news article claimed that Activision got access to the data of our users. This I didn't see in the document, so I think this was made up by somebody or just conjecture. So they actually are probably correct on this. It's completely false and a surprise. The news articles don't link any source. Fine. Um, all relevant documents regarding the lawsuit are publicly available if you want to look it up yourself, which I did, and it's excellent read. And now they're trying to claim our domain. We've created backup domains, and this is my favorite part. We hope and think that our domain registrar will not defer to this bogus claim that would not have been approved by any clear-headed judge with even basic democratic values in a proper jurisdiction. Well, they've already seized it. It's locked. You can't they can't do anything with their domain, and that they're going to lose it here shortly. Um, so RAPU. And they are going to make a free cheat, which is actually really interesting based on some of the statements in the case. So that's their response. But I want to talk about the lawsuit and the judgment specifically and why Engine Owning probably doesn't realize how screwed they are. Um, so in that response, they make a very clear statement that they are looking for, or that they are not responsible for this lawsuit. They're not actually. They're basically claiming they're not subject to this lawsuit because the people named in the lawsuit, the individuals, are with the company anymore. They've been fired, right? Which, if the lawsuit was targeting those individual people, then sure, right? Those individuals would face it, but Engine Owning, would just carry on as normal. The reality is those individuals, um, I don't remember their names, but they're listed in there, are only part of it because it actually the lawsuit, and we'll go through some of this together. The lawsuit actually targets um, the defendants, Engine Owning UG, EO, and Garnat's Enterprise Limited, and then all the individuals listed after that. So the important thing to keep in mind is they didn't just target the owners, right? The people that that created the site and programmed the cheats. They actually targeted Engine Owning as a corporate entity and Garnat's Enterprise, which is kind of a holding company or a shell company for the programming side of it. So the brief look that I've done on this, you have Engine Owning UG, which is the engine owning company. They sell the cheats, right? That's the brand name. And then you actually have the engineering work done and they're in Germany. And then you have in Belize, you have this company, this software engineering company called Garnat's Enterprise, and they're actually appear to be the ones that that's the engineering firm. So you pay Engine Owning your money for your cheats, and then Engine Owning pays them for the engineering work. I'm not entirely it's not clear what the exact relation is, but my research suggests that that's kind of what's going on. And then they're all both companies are held by individuals. So what they did is they targeted the companies, right? The corporate entities of Engine Owning and the back end firm. They didn't just target the employees, right? The owners. So the fact that Engine Owning UG has changed hands doesn't change the fact that Engine Owning UG is targeted in the lawsuit. So it doesn't matter who you hand the hot potato off to, the hot potato is still in trouble, right? They're still going to get hit with this. And so and it's interesting that they didn't break up who owes what share of the $14 million judgment, right? Basically, everybody seems to own an equal share in this judgment. And so we might hear more about this later. But the argument that Engine Owning is making on their site is complete fantasy, because the owners of Engine Owning are irrelevant to the case, because it's Engine Owning itself that's being sued, right? So whoever owns Engine Owning is stuck holding the bag for this issue. So the fact that that's where we are on this is, or that where Engine Owning is going on this, is really kind of funny. But it kind of gets better, because um the case goes through and details who everybody is, um and targets them specifically. So one of the things that this judge notes in the case is that they are prevalent, and that they're basically uh, aggressive in their defiance of previous orders, that they are willfully and intentionally circumventing security measures, and therefore, the order and issuing the summary judgment is actually necessary and important, in preventing Activision from taking more damages from their actions, which means that the way that the case is presented, the judgment, the way it reads, is that they're kind of opening the door in a lot of ways to make going after Engine Owning specifically, and other cheap providers that follow the same model. Uh, it makes going after them easier, because now you have a template and you have a default judgment. Um, and so they went after them pretty hard with all of this. And then what they did was, um, in issuing it, they talked about, I'm just scrolling down to the right section. Um, they talked about the different merits, and they hit them with a variety of different aspects. I'm going to pull the judgment up again. So, one of the everybody looks at, there were 2 pages to the judgment, and that's what Activision, that's what everybody read online. But when you actually dig into the 14-page document, there's a lot here, and it kind of, if you've read it and then you read the reply from Engine Owning, you would shake your head at what they're doing. But if we bring this up and we look at, the different areas that they're attacking, right? So you have this DMCA violation, and so that's a big one, because the DMCA, Digital Millennial Copyright Act, is very easy to enforce, especially if you have a court order, um, with enforcement on it already. And so the court basically concludes that the plaintiff's allegations that cheating software was specifically designed to circumvent the COD game's anti-cheating technology is sufficient to allege a claim under section 1201A2, which means that other cheaters can now be subject to DMCA actions. And as many creators will tell you, if you violate DMCA, you can get your stuff taken down real fast. But this opens the door to have things like domain names seized, and websites turned off, and what's it called? social media accounts blocked, all of these things. If you're willfully encouraging people to block, to violate the DMCA, then what happens is the host company, the company that hosts your content, whether it's a domain registrar, a website hosting company, a social media company like Twitter or MySpace or MySpace. God, how old am I? Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, right? Like those guys, when they get a DMCA takedown notice, they have to take it down immediately because it's what protects those entities from getting from feeling the heat from the companies themselves, right? So like if you are hosting unintentionally content from somebody else that violates the DMCA, it violates copyright basically, then you actually are protected as long as you take it down when it's brought to your attention, right? So as long as you act quickly to take it down, then you as the hosting company are protected. In this case, we now have a court order saying that engine owning offering cheats violates the DMCA. So as long as Microsoft is on top of it, cheats now violate the DMCA, at least in the state of California, right? So any cheat company that's going to offer or expose their information to the state of California is going to be falling under this Ninth Circuit order. So the likelihood is that they will have an easier time knocking out domains and knocking out websites and even knocking out X accounts, right? Because if your account exists to sell violations of the DMCA, that's not allowed, right? Like you can't sit there and advertise violations of the DMCA on social media platforms without the social media platforms opening themselves up to liability by allowing that. So it opens a lot of really interesting doors. So from a whack-a-mole, like aggressive public persona, like public, or public awareness, I guess, angle, you should be able, Activision and Microsoft should be able to start knocking these guys off, offline in the visible way, even though they might not be, even though they might not be offline completely, like the cheats might still be active. Like the average consumer, you and me wouldn't be able to click on engineowning.com and go buy cheats from them, because you do that and this domain name will be deleted. You go to Engine Owning's Twitter account and it'll be gone, right? And so by pushing it out of the public domain, you actually should have an advantage in reducing the cheaters, because the casual cheaters who are just out to have some fun will have to work significantly harder to even find the cheats, much less get them and have them work, versus just going on Google searching Warzone cheats and clicking on the first link that pops up, right? So that's a W. That's a big W for Call of Duty and for gaming in general, right? And then you have the CFAA, and then you have RICO, right? And so both of these are about both of these are basically different ways of attacking it, attacking kind of the visibility of cheat providers, right? Specifically, the CFAA is going to go after domain registrars and website hosting companies, and so by having that section and that charge be confirmed, be found in default here, that's another leverage tool, right? So now you can directly go after domain registrars and website hosting companies. So if you're hosting Engine Owning, or one of the mirrors of Engine Owning, that if you continue to host it, you're likely to receive a court order saying, hey, take them offline, and if you don't comply, you're basically going to be held equally liable for the content that you're hosting, right? So we should see rapid takedowns once they kind of get this going, and we do see this. So this is the sort of thing that we see in like live sports streaming. That's why if you're the kind of person, I'm not saying any of you are, but if you're the kind of person who watches live sports on illicit streaming services, they're harder to find than they used to be, and they tend to go offline very quickly, right? Sometimes they don't even last for a full game, versus maybe 10 years ago when you could bookmark sites and they'd be up for weeks or months at a time. And that's because actions that the broadcast industry has taken, right? Sports industries have taken against this industry and these sites, and they've turned it in, very similar to how big music companies and big video companies will take down their content very quickly, right? They'll send out, they'll just rubber stamp DMCA takedown notices left and right. You can do that same sort of thing here with domain registrars, right? So you register a domain, you host this content, and a company can just go and say, that's illegal. Here's a court order saying that content's illegal. Take it down, and the domain registrars will take it down very quickly. Same with hosting companies. And then you get into the next section, which is my favorite. This is my favorite section. RICO violations. RICO is kind of, it's more than, just some dude in Florida. RICO is a racketeering, right? So this is what they came up with in the 70s to go after the mob, right? They basically said, they had so much trouble going after mobsters because of the way that they hid their money. And so, you could go and stash money in different banks and stash money in deposit boxes and put money all over in assets and all these places that were very hard to track down. And so they basically came up with a system of saying, well, if you're connected to this illegal activity, then everything that you own is subject to it, and anybody who hides that is in trouble. And so what they've done is they've said, hey, we're going to compel banks and financial institutions to cooperate with us and actually provide us with the information on where you're keeping your money and what assets you own. And so because RICO is actually is recognized international by anybody who wants to do business in the US, which is most everybody, especially in the financial sector, if you have money offshore, right, in say Belize or Germany, and those banks are connected in one way or the other to the international banking community, they have to abide by court orders to seize accounts. And so what a RICO charge, in this case defaulting on it, does is it basically is going to significantly limit the ability of the defendants, including the corporate entities, to transact in a normal way, right? Visa and all these other card issuers, they're not going to be able to touch them. They're not going to be able to get other companies like, Bank of America or was it CBS? No, that's a broadcasting company. I don't know, but the big foreign international banks, right? European banks and whatnot. They're not going to be able to hide assets in those banks, right? So that means that if they have accounts with those banks, those accounts are subject to forfeiture, right? The U.S. can leverage this RICO conviction and freeze their assets. And so it's going to limit the ability, especially from a corporate state, to do things like take credit cards. So all of this together is going to make it more difficult in a lot of ways for the companies, for engine owning in this specific case, to actually be able to transact, right? So they're going to probably have to go a crypto route, right? They're not going to be able to take standard payments. They're going to have to do wallet transfers and things like that, right? Or little ways to go around it, or they have to find ways to work with banks that refuse to work with the international community, which is still going to make things like credit card payments very difficult to do. So all of this together creates a framework by which Microsoft, which is very litigious on these issues, by the way, they don't like people taking their stuff without asking and without paying. They're very litigious should be able to start playing whack-a-mole with all these different accounts and all these different sites that will start popping up as engine owning, right? Because they're after the corporate entities. So there is no hiding from this by simply transferring the corporate entity from one person to another, because the entity itself is what's under review, and the ownership of that entity is going to be, sharing the hold of the bag, right? Because the entities are the defendants. So the other part, and the thing that really struck me as kind of hilarious in this. I'm scrolling down to this section because it is wild. Um, where's the section of it? I lost it. Basically, the attorneys for engine owning actually quit. Um, which was a super fun part to read. The the merit like the one of the issues here is that the owners of engine owning don't actually seem to realize how much trouble they're in. The way that they're posting is going to absolutely be viewed as flying in the face of the courts, right? You know, if you want to fly in the face of Activision, you want to give them the finger and kind of do what you do, that's fine. People do that all the time, and there's not a lot of recourse for that. But in this case, like you're thumbing your nose at the Ninth Circuit of the U.S. Federal court system, which that's not usually good because they don't let this stuff go often, right? So what we're going to find, I think, and um, this is going to depend on how aggressive Microsoft gets, but Activision or engine owning is going to have a very hard time really doing anything once Microsoft gets the ball rolling and starts actually going after them. But this is the section right here that I wanted to just kind of look at again. So um, they made a motion to demit to dis, engine owning made a motion to dismiss the FAC, which was a the first um, amended complaint, which is what FAC stands for. So basically, the um, uh, Activision was Activision at the time. Now it would be Microsoft. Actually added on to their original lawsuit and said, hey, this one they added on RICO and they added on these other things and said, hey, and we're able to actually identify and name a bunch of defendants. They said, hey, we're gonna add on to these people. Well, they filed a motion to dismiss, and that was or to dismiss it, and that was not granted. Um, and then it says the court issued the MTD order. After the court issued their order, attorneys for the moving defendants indicated that there was a breakdown in communication with their clients, and the court granted the counsel's request to withdraw from the matter, aka they quit. The engine ownings lawyers quit, which is not easy to do, mind you. All right. And then two of the defendants told the court that they're going to proceed pro se, i.e., on their own with no attorney, and nobody else replied, and they basically just stopped replying, which is kind of how we got here. So, it's wild, wild that they did that. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is that attorneys don't get to just walk away, right? You take on a case, you see it to the end. There are some cases, some instances in which an attorney can actually quit, right? Both the attorney and the client decide mutually that they're not working out, so the attorneys go, the clients will do their own thing. That's one. If the attorney or if the clients are misrepresenting their case to the attorneys to such a degree that continuing, excuse me, would require the attorneys to violate ethics, right? AKA, they don't have a case, and to go forward with what their clients are telling them to do would be lying to the court, not just presenting legal options, right? But just lying or behaving completely unethical. It's another one. Or if the clients just disappeared, or if the clients ran out of money, right? Like those are the main things. Like if you are an attorney and you take on a case, like you're riding it out unless one of those things happens. And the fact that they say it was a breakdown in communication tells me one of a couple of options. It kind of throws the um it kind of throws the mutual thing out the window, right? Because they didn't say it was a mutual agreement to break off their defense of them. It either means that engine owning is out of money, they can't pay their attorneys, which is possible, or it means that that the engine owning folks just kind of disappeared and didn't come back, which could be. But given that some of them actually did return to the reference to the court saying that they want to represent themselves, kind of indicates to me that maybe that's probably lower likelihood, or that their defense was so bad and they were so blatantly lying to their attorneys that the attorneys couldn't continue in good faith. And that was a breakdown in communication. Like, they misrepresented themselves to the attorneys when they hired them, and now that the attorneys have realized what they're up against or what they're dealing with, that was an issue. So that's my personal favorite. I really hope that it is, because those dirtbags deserve it. I also feel like it's possible that they ran out of, equally likely that they, probably more likely actually, that they ran out of money and can't actually pay the attorneys. But I feel like they would have mentioned that in the filing, that they would have said, hey, we actually they couldn't afford us anymore. They can't pay our bills. They're not, we have to send them to collections. So we're out. I think that would have been stated in here. Um, which also leaves that the engine owning people just kind of put their heads in the sand and pretended like all of this would just go away. Which I think that, or that is a very high probability as well, based on the fact that they basically did that. So one way or the other, the attorneys quit, and then engine owning did nothing after that and got ruled against, and seemed to have no concept of what they've done to themselves by doing so. In the US court system, if you don't show up, you are guilty in a civil trial like this. Like, that's what a default judgment means. And that is basically what we're looking at here. So, a layman's read of this is highly entertaining. And I really feel like engine owning has screwed themselves big time. A lot of bravado talk on Twitter, but I have a feeling that they are trying to scramble and figure out what to do. I think the reality is that engine owning is probably done for within the next 4 to 6 months, unless Microsoft drops the ball. And that's going to be the big thing, right? Microsoft has some legal leverage here to really hammer these guys into the dirt and kind of go after a lot of the other cheap providers out there. Um, and so one of the things that we're going to have to look for going forward is how aggressive Microsoft decides to get to protect their new investment that they just spent $68 billion on. I hope they spend a lot of money hammering these people into the ground, and they go and they throw their nets wide and catch up most of the cheap providers in this sort of legal system that makes it very hard to distribute your cheats, very hard to advertise it, and very hard to transact, especially in anything connected to the Western banking world. So that's my hope. That's my read on the actual 14-page document, and hopefully we'll see some relief from this cheating going forward. So that's what I got for you today. Thanks for watching through, and I'll catch you on the next one.